Hello, this is Fritz-Ay says, and welcome back to One Last Night. It's now 2024. Happy New Year, everyone. And, yeah, I've had a pretty good New Year. Had a nice party, did a little countdown, did a little dancing, had a good time. Yeah, it's been quite a while since I've come back to One Last Night, and I know there's been a few updates since I've come back, but last we left off, we just had defeated one of the fated, and Xavier was just about to get into the ring, and he doesn't have access to a bow. So let's see how he fares. Dear Marshall, I'm scared. We're about to reach 2 years together, a milestone for any young couple. It's something I should be ecstatic for. Knowing we've been together so long feels both like an impossibility and a blessing, having you love me every step of the way. Which is why I'm even more scared. This was how long things lasted when I was still with Alistair. That name still angers me. I thought things were going well then, too, but I was blindsided. I don't want the same thing to happen with you. I believe in your feelings, and I trust you to communicate with me. I do. But there's a nagging sensation at the back of my mind that says I don't deserve you, that you'll abandon me like he did. It's made me think a lot about myself, honestly. I'm scared of you leaving just as I was when I was with him at the start. I've had various friends come and go in my life, which has only fueled that fear. Even my parents are gone now. I've been surrounded by people, but have never forged any connections for long. I have you, and very few friends I could truly call close. In truth, that's all I could ever want, really. Yet I'm scared of how long they'll all last. Everyone before has left me, so why would now be any different? What's changed to make them stay? It's the thoughts like these that bother me, that haunt me on days like today when that voice gets too loud. I understand some people have to leave, whether by choice or by forces out of their control. I know none of them are trying to abandon me, which is not what I'm scared of. Since we've been together, it's shown me that I can grow and move on, and that I can be who I was while being someone new. I can change. So after thinking through it again and again and again, I know what I'm afraid of. I know what keeps me up at night, stressing me out as you dream peacefully beside me. I'm scared to be alone. I'm scared of having nobody with me, nobody I can share a true connection with. I'm scared of not having you with me, Marshall. There's never been anybody who I've gotten as close to as I have with you. I'll do my best to quiet these fears for now, to look forward to what our lives together have in store. That's what I'm going to focus on. Just please, Marshall, though you'll never read this, promise me one thing. Never leave me alone. Love, Dorian. No. The word escaped my lips in a hushed tone, drowned out by the sound of the crowd. At the moment, all I could hear was my own thoughts. There had to be something I could do to stop this, to get Xavier out of this fight. He practiced fencing with a stick once. Once! That was nowhere near enough experience, despite how fast of a learner he was. I still struggled in my fight, and there was no telling what fated he'd be pitted against. The anxiety began to build in my chest, drawing from the fear that always lingered there. I can't lose Xavier right now. I just can't. No, I won't. If this is meant to be my story, then I sure as hell am not letting his chapter in it end this soon. I stopped my retreat to the locker room, turning back to face Alistair as a last-ditch idea rooted itself in my mind. His eyes met mine instantly, as if he were waiting for this. He raised a hand to quiet the crowd. "I'll do it." He blinked, the words momentarily catching him off guard. "You'll do what, exactly?" "I'll take Xavier's place." An uneasy silence fell over the arena as its observers began processing what I'd just announced. They'd seen my last fight, saw how battered I had been. I was a bleeding and bruised mess standing before them all, asking to fight for their amusement once more. It was pathetic. As if on cue with that thought, the whole crowd burst into laughter at my suggestion. Not a single one of them was taking me seriously. They didn't matter right now, however. The only one I needed to convince was Alistair. "Isn't this what you wanted Wonderland to be? A show full of drama and suspense as the people at your mercy fight for their lives? Wouldn't you derive more entertainment from watching me get further injuries for the sake of someone close to me?" The crowd began to quiet once more as I finished my statement, hoping to appeal to the lion who hated me. It was a desperate gambit for sure, but I refused to lose someone I'd bonded with so fast. The last person that happened with was Marshall. I shook the thought from my head, pulling myself back to the present. These were things I could go over later when I wasn't trying to save someone's life. Alistair seemed to be pondering my query, using this moment to draw all attention to himself once more. "It's a good argument, I'll give you that. A man desperately pleading to spare his lover's life to sacrifice his own, especially when said man has wronged me in the past." I bit my tongue to keep from retaliating. Clearly, in his eyes, I was the villain. "But..." I fell to my knees instantly as a blunt object collided with the back of my head, sending stars throughout my vision. I'd been so focused on Alistair I'd forgotten about the guards. "That's not how things work here. Look at yourself. You were barely able to stand as is, and there's definitely no hope of that now." The lion chuckled, clearly amused over the fact that he was responsible for my condition. The guards lifted me by the arms, beginning to drag me across the arena as I tried to get a grip on my bodily functions. "You believe yourself to be all that. Some hero from the ages who puts others first. You think as though you're the protagonist of some story. Let me be the first to break it to you, Dorian. You're pathetic. Try as you might, you exist as nothing but a burden to those around you. You drag everyone down as if it means you can rise to the top and be better. It doesn't matter who you step on if it makes you look like you're in the right. Everyone but you can see that. Look at the man who tried to defend you, Xavier. See him for what he truly is. He couldn't even believe in you to do this fight on your own. He seeks control and nothing less." Anger started to bubble up as I listened to his words, my senses beginning to recover from the blow as he continued his monologue. "I'll say this once more, Dorian, so listen well. You are not the protagonist. Grow up and realize that. Especially right now. More importantly, know when and where your place is. You had your time in the spotlight, but right now, this is my show, and what I say goes." We finally reached the locker room again, the guards wasting no time in throwing my body through the door into the ground. I hit it hard, panting as the aches in my body washed over me.
And I say, we give our next competitor the chance to show he's more than his companion believes he is. Once more, everyone give a round of applause for the lovely Xavier.
I laid there as the crowd outside roared in approval over the speech. Alistair no doubt reveling in the gratification. Other than the physical effects of what had just happened, I felt the mental ones hitting hard at my own insecurities. Despite it being years since we last spoke, I trusted him with all my fears and worries, and he clearly hadn't forgotten them since. Maybe he even planned to use them against me like this one day. I always worried about being the one that people have to lag behind for, that they're waiting for me to catch up to their pace. I've never been the best at anything despite how I've tried. I focused and improved some skills, but I couldn't help but think I'd never be worth it. Even now, I knew what I'd done was idiotic. While my heart was in the right place, Alistair was right. I hadn't shown Xavier any faith in his abilities. I should know from my experiences with him this past week that no matter what, the bat isn't a quitter. He has the spirit to keep going. I don't know what motivates him the most, but I know that I can trust him. He could do this. The sound of footsteps approaching drew me back into my pained body. The aches of the wounds and blunt traumas starting to settle in were a harsh reminder of reality.
Out of the fucking way! Do none of you have any decency anymore?
The familiar figures of Shen and Treat approached me, shoving aside the other prisoners who made no attempts to help me whatsoever. They crouched to either side of me, helping me back to my feet.
Hey man, you still with us? Think you can stand?
Yes, and yes, I should be able to. The moment they let go, I stumbled with my first step.
If you're fine, then I'm straight. Treat, get his other arm.
The Wolverine shot them a glare but obliged, the two of them propping me up as we walked towards the exit at the back. I wanted to protest, to stay and watch Xavier's fight, to cheer him on, but I knew that he'd put my health over that. I needed to rest and believed he'd be okay. I wouldn't lose him too. Everyone just watched as we passed, trying to avoid catching the fire of the ignited should they help us. It really goes to show people aren't inherently selfish by nature. Very few people are willing to stick their neck out just to help someone in need. It sickened me. The guard standing at the exit door didn't budge as we approached, glaring at us with disinterest.
There's no exit until Wonderland is over for the day.
We know that, but our friend here is injured after his fight. He needs to be taken to the nurse and treated.
The second bandit rolled his eyes before giving me a once-over.
I don't see anything life-threatening. He should be fine to stay.
I could hear the growl in Treat's throat as he responded as calmly as he could.
One of your colleagues just bludgeoned the back of his head, likely giving him a concussion. He needs a proper place to rest.
Sounds like what he needs is to walk it off. Nobody is leaving this room, understand? Besides, the last thing we'd do is listen to someone like yourself get lost.
Treat's muzzle drew back in a snarl, looking as though he was ready to tear them apart before I felt a small shake behind my neck. Shen drew their companion's attention back to them, bringing Treat back out of the anger to take a deep breath. The collected look returned to his face as he made eye contact with Shen.
May I?
Treat smiled.
Go right ahead.
Shen took their arm off my shoulder and slipped away. Taking a step forward towards the guards, they put on that smile from earlier and looked the second bandit in the eyes.
I'll say this once, so hopefully you two morons can understand. Let us take him to the nurse, or else.
The bandit sneered at the hyena.
Else what? What's a slut like you going to do?
Shen's grin widened.
This.
Before any of us could process what happened, Shen's fist connected hard with the nose of the bandit. The force combined with the surprise of it sent him stumbling back to the wall as he crumpled instantly and cried out in pain.
Oh, fuck me! I already have. Didn't know someone was capable of finishing that fast. I'd say it was flattering if it wasn't so pitiful.
The other guard quickly recovered from the sudden shock and raised his club to attack the hyena. Shen was already on them, though. The guard doubled over as the hyena slammed their fist into his gut, bringing down an elbow from above to send him to the ground in a heap. One out of breath, and the other clutching his likely broken nose, Shen crouched and grabbed them by the head fur.
Now this is a sight I'm more than familiar with. Two assholes getting what's coming to them.
They smashed the heads of the two together before standing up and brushing off their hands as the guards groaned in pain.
Look at that! You're even moaning too!
The other guards had begun to make their way towards us to get to Shen, but they raised their hands in defense.
Sorry. All good now. We'll go back to being good little captives.
Shen backed away and gestured for us to follow, Treat turning to me to help me along. While I was surprised by Shen's sudden aggressiveness, I was more surprised by the fact the guards had listened to them and left us alone. Looking back, I could even see a few laughing at the crumpled bandits. Maybe it wasn't that bad of a strategy to sleep with the enemy. Treat and Shen exchanged a look as they helped me to a bench far from the door to sit, smiles on both their faces. I couldn't help but find myself joining in. Those smiles soon erupted into laughter for a few moments, all of us reveling in what had just happened and the absurdity of it.
Oh, seeing you beat their asses will never get old to me.
Me neither, in more ways than one.
Treat turned to me in an effort to move the conversation elsewhere.
First things first. Let me examine your injuries, Dorian. You can probably answer some questions we have too in the process.
Only if I get to ask some of my own.
Deal.
And make it fast. I need to see Xavier's fight. He deserves at least one comforting face in the sea of enemies.
Let's get to it then.
The Wolverine started his inspection from the back of my head, checking the trauma there first.
I'll cut to the thing I'm most curious about. You have a past with that freak of a ringmaster? He stated he knew you.
That would be because he does, and we do.
How?
That's my ex-boyfriend. Treat's fingers press a little too hard on the bruise as I said that, causing me to wince.
Sorry, but also repeat that.
You dated him? Shit, his head trauma might be worse than we thought if he's this delusional.
I glared at the hyena. Believe me, nobody regrets this decision more than me. I wasted 2 years of my life on his bullshit. Shen whistled in amazement.
Are you colorblind then? Or is red just your favorite color of flag?
I sighed, trying not to move too much so Treat could finish his inspection faster. He wasn't different back then. Nothing like he is now.
Or you were just so blinded by your feelings, you didn't want to believe you were seeing his true self as things progressed. I assume that's why you ended things?
Not exactly.
Then what happened?
A loud roar from the crowd outside caught my attention, taking me out of the conversation and back to what was happening in the meanwhile. I'll tell you more when Xavier is back. Is your inspection done now so we can go cheer him on, Doctor?
You're not in great condition and should be resting, but your wounds have stopped bleeding for the moment. As long as you don't move too roughly, you'll be fine.
Then let's go. With Treat's help, I stood up and carefully began making my way over to the windows. Wait, are you actually a doctor or even one in training?
Nope. I was in school for biochemistry. I ended up taking a class on the anatomies of anthropospecies to help my studies.
Where'd you study?
I had a scholarship over at Gulhaven due to my rugby skills.
I've been right in my earlier assumption that he attended there then. I wanted to ask him more, but that could wait until after Xavier's fight. As some of the prisoners saw us approach the windows, they stepped out of the way. They'd likely seen our earlier confrontation and wanted to steer clear of us. Given that there was only one person on the field, as the door to it opened and the weapon rack was brought in, it wasn't hard to find Xavier there. The bat was standing with a sword in his hands, both tightly gripping the handle. I'd expected to find fear on his face, worry of what was to come. Instead, his expression was full of anger. I'd seen glimpses of it before, when we met the Silence and were captured, but it was nothing compared to the fury that resided there now. Alistair was already drawing a note from the bowl, about to call out the crate number of which fated that Xavier would fight was hidden inside.
Door number 7.
Just like when it was my turn, the crate above opened the doors using ropes to allow the monster inside to escape and wreak havoc. We all waited with bated breath to see what would exit those doors.
Breathe, Xavier. You can handle this. I tried my hardest to keep my heartbeat steady as I anxiously awaited whatever monster was coming for me. Without a bow, I was already at a disadvantage. Add that to my broken finger and it dropped my chances of winning even lower. This whole tournament was about chance, really. It was luck of the draw which fated would come my way, and I had to be prepared. I tightened my grip on the longsword I'd chosen to fight with, the daylight gleaming off the well-kept blade. It was my best choice. I handled a few to test them out, finding they were surprisingly light. They must have only weighed a few pounds each. I had enough arm muscle to use it due to the lightness, and although the fencing lesson with Dorian was all I had to work with, it was a better base knowledge for me to use comparatively. With this sword, I could use it either one-handed or, the more comfortable option for me, two-handed. I'd leave the former to desperate situations. Oh, I wish I had a shield. The sudden thud from the door startled me as sand began to fly up from the arena floor, heading to my left rather than directly towards me. It was hard to tell how large the creature was, likely due to the fact that it had curled into a ball. I'd guess about the size of the average humanoid, maybe a little wider. What made it even harder to determine was that it was rolling. Reminded me almost of a pale bug, like I'd find when I'm playing in the garden as a kid, except this was a much scarier in comparison. The faded was a blur of pale flesh as it circled me,
stirring up sand as it moved to partially obscure my vision. The large chitinous scales that made up its exterior were a matte white and gray, rough enough though as not to shine. I stood firm in the center, watching it keep moving in circles. When and how was it planning to attack? The Faded suddenly stopped and charged straight for me, turning much faster than I would have expected. I raised my sword in preparation to parry an attack. At the last moment, the creature flung itself from the ground and into the air. I brought my blade up in an attempt to block the blow, the realization that it was using its entire body as a weapon becoming painfully obvious, only for it to seemingly miss me entirely. The creature landed behind me with a thud and bounced, checking into me as I was turning to deflect. I stumbled forward in pain, the sheer blunt force of the attack nearly knocking me over. My shoulder ached from the blow, meaning it would be even harder to parry an attack. A dodge was the better option to win. A small sense of pride at my battle tactics surged in my chest. I was beginning to sound experienced when in reality, a few fantasy novels could do wonders in strategy. Now wasn't the time for that, though. I could see it preparing to make its next strike. I'd have to try and hit it with my blade next. I knew how I preferred to attack now, and I needed to check if my sword could penetrate the shell next, meaning I had to time the dodge right. It pivoted toward me again, building its momentum before launching. I waited longer this time to see what it would do, waiting for the timing to step into place. Now! I dodged to the left just barely, bringing my sword up for a slash as if I were about to hit a home run. There was a large clunk as my blade collided with the chitin hard before it was deflected. The monster was thrown off its initial course and rolled away to a stop. That was a no for hitting it normally then. It had to have a weak spot somewhere, but the question was where. I could only take so many more hits before my endurance was up, and the throb of my broken finger wasn't helping. The Faded started moving again, building up speed as I took a moment to think. If this thing was like a pill bug, then this was essentially its defensive mode. It had to be able to unfurl itself somehow, and maybe I could learn more that way. The Weevil bolted towards me, seeming to aim for the side and to do another attack from behind. I went to dodge, but it changed the direction of its body at the last minute, hurtling towards me. I managed to bring my sword up to block the direct impact to my body, but let out a cry of pain as the pressure on my broken finger built and I was knocked flat onto the ground, the sword falling from my hands. Before I could react, the monster was on me in an instant. It launched upwards again, then unfurled with a dramatic screech. Time seemed to stop as it hung above me, suspended in midair. Underneath the exterior shell was a pale-skinned underbelly. The length of it encompassed the entirety of my body. Its stubby legs resembled that of hands and planted themselves on my sides, giving me little room to move from the weight of its heavy body on mine. I looked down at the underbelly, seeing pale, pupilless eyes stare back at me with a long appendage full of glistening teeth snaking downwards. The Weevil pressed down on me, the mouth attaching to my torso and biting into my flesh. I cried out in pain as I felt the warmth of my blood leaking out from my body as it chewed into my stomach. On instinct, I swung my head upwards as I cried. My forehead collided with the fleshy underside. The Faded released from me and curled up as if tried to flee. I know its weakness now, but it had cost me a good amount of blood. I grabbed the sword and used it to help myself up, trying to think of how to get it to open itself up again so I could stab it properly. It charged again and I dodged, interrupting my train of thought. The weevil seemed to be moving faster, as though it were desperate to win now too. The speed of attacks began to quicken, leaving me with little to no time to think. I didn't know how to get it to open up again, and my stamina was decreasing rapidly with my open wound. As I went for my next dodge, I wasn't able to move fast enough. The body collided with my shoulder and I let out a screech of pain, my arm falling limply to my side as if it had been dislocated from the trauma. The sword fell from my grasp as my hand went too numb from the shock. I spun to watch the creature with gritted teeth. I was running out of time. I had to get desperate. An idea came to me, one that would more likely get me killed, but the rage and adrenaline from it convinced me I had to try it no matter what. As the monster shot towards me again, I dodged quickly to the side. It still clipped me, however, and I was sent sprawling face first down into the ground. I was glad from the numbness in my arm dulling the pain momentarily, but resented the sand in my open stomach wound. My dominant arm lay beneath me and ready. From the corner of my eye, I saw it spread out once more, leaping up to the cloudless sky above me to pounce on my broken, bleeding form. I pushed my arm off to turn over, pointing the sword up from where I lay on it in one motion, using all my strength to send out a final thrust. The weevil impaled itself on my blade, shrieking in pain as its black blood trickled down the metal. I used it as leverage to get back to my feet, pinning it to the ground one-handed as it squirmed. I dragged the blade upward as it let out a dying scream, signifying my victory in the fight. I did it. I won. And yet, anger still burned inside me. I wasn't done with it yet. I nearly collapsed as I watched Xavier deliver the killing blow. I'd barely breathed the whole fight from the sheer anxiety of it all. The hands of my two new companions helped keep me upright as I took a second to relax. He did it. He really did it. I looked at his face, trying to see the same sense of triumph that I was feeling at the moment, except it was nowhere to be found. The crowd loudly cheered to Xavier's deaf ears as he stared at the corpse, one arm hanging limply by his side. I could see what emotion displayed itself plainly on his face. Rage. He raised his sword again, the crowd cheering louder, believing he was doing it for them, and causing Alistair to step forward with his booming voice.
Everyone, we have another glorious victor. Give it up for the...
His voice trailed off as Xavier brought the sword down finally, cutting into the flesh and spraying him with blackened blood. And then he swung again. And again. And again. And again. The bat hacked at the weevil until it was nothing more than a pile of minced meat, coating Xavier with a vicious layer of blackened blood. The crowd had stopped cheering, falling silent and stunned at the sheer violence that had occurred. Everyone was uncomfortably quiet. Xavier dropped the blade to the sand, falling to his knees and breathing heavily. I never thought he had something like that in him, but I guess we all reach a breaking point. This was his. He let his emotions take control, and that faded was the victim of his built-up anger at everything.
As I said.
Alistair cleared his throat, his voice cracking with the initial delivery.
Give it up for Xavier, the barbarian bat.
I wasn't sure why I expected the crowd to react in the same manner as Alistair had. Shocked and uncomfortable, when instead they exploded into deafening cheers of delight at the violence presented to them. They'd all come to experience the show of a lifetime, and here was given in graphic detail. This was the violence they craved, and Xavier had delivered it tenfold. The guards moved to the field again, bringing out the weapon rack and clearing out the body while they began to drag Xavier back. Alistair should have been narrating this part, continuing the show, but with a final look towards the lion, he seemed to be shaken by the whole thing. Maybe there was a bit of his old conscience left after all. And I'm gonna call it there. Oh, man. Yeah, this is a little bit of a short one. I'm sorry, but... Oh, that was brutal. Oh, that was good stuff. Classic role, get them to impale themselves on it. But, man, the rage that Xavier was feeling. Gotta say, I was kind of chuckling a little bit of, like, fantasy novel and strategy. It's like, no. Oh, that's not gonna help. Adrenaline. You need a practice. You need practice. But yeah, no, that was fun. Yeah, this has been Fritz-Ay Says, and I hope everyone has a nice day. Ciao.